I'm going to use a little metaphor today, Rowboat in the woods, and the role of humanism in the secular future. This is what I want us to think about.
I think somebody's in the back trying to do that just
Oh,
now.
yes, can we get the lights? This is what I want us to think about today. Walt Whitman thought about it a long time ago. Unscrew the locks from the doors. Unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs. You've read the Pew results. You've heard arguments about what they mean. The data says that 1/4 of Americans who would at one time have been expected to identify themselves as Christian, people who are traditional Christians or tradition Christians, now don't identify as such. Perhaps business entrepreneur Seth Godin best summarizes the conundrum for mainline Protestant congregations when he says, "You are yelling at people who think they have a problem that you cannot solve." That's how businesses go bust, and it's how congregations go bust as well. Frankly, I'm very skeptical that institutional religions can solve the problems that most Americans face today. People are voting with their feet. And I'm not inclined toward making what I would think is a patriarchal assumption that they are merely confused children. Some thinking about religion and others just forgetting about it, and all they have to do is be reminded about it. I don't think traditional religions have as much more to offer than what it offered me and I turned down 40 years ago: bells and some candles and some buildings and some interesting texts. That's the way it's been for a long time. I know that by saying that, I'm in danger of walking into the trap of claiming that religions have to be consumerist. They have to make the consumer happy. To which I will say, that's the way religion in the United States has always been. Pew says it, as does the Barna Group, a research group funded by churches on the more conservative end of the spectrum. They estimate that 1 in 3, a little more than that, 37% of Americans are what they call post-Christian. Again, let's entertain this thought. Woo! But I can't read now.
There we go.
What if, there you go, that worked. Does that work for? Yeah, good. What if that 37% of Americans are not confused about their best interests? What if they are best served by leaving traditional religions behind? You know, it was humanism and secularism that won that Supreme Court decision today. It was humanism that won that great victory with voters in Ireland, a country that the great Irish writer James Joyce called priest-ridden back in his time. Humanism won when the voters approved same-sex marriage in that country. Humanism won, Roman Catholicism lost. What if the church is wrong and the people voting with their consciences and their feet are in the right? You can call it consumerism, or you can give people credit for realizing that their need for meaning and purpose is not met within conventional religious structures. Now, I blog about such matters, and here's a response that I got in the comments section. Frankly, many of us are having to work more days and more hours to keep our families financially afloat. Dressing for church on Sunday morning feels like a 7-day work week. More obligations, more projects, more financial obligations, more to-do lists. Did I hear an amen back there somewhere? I fear that many churches have been caught up in the capitalization tide, like the health and academic institutions, feeling a powerful need for fancy buildings while losing sight of the primary humane mission. Finished with a smiley face. Now, this woman is addressing two very different issues, one a matter of programming and one a matter of a much deeper institutional problem. Question, is this woman a candidate for Unitarian Universalism if we can get the time right for our services? Or has she left the organized religion building entirely because institutions have stopped serving her needs and began to serve only their own? Which leads me to my central question of the day. Is the congregational model a rowboat in the woods? A rowboat in the woods. Yeah, once there was a lot of water for them to float around in. And actually, rowboats can be propelled in woods even after the water's gone, but it takes a whole lot of effort. I also will quickly admit that there are bays and creeks and streams still out there where rowboats and congregations are totally fine modes of transportation. Rowboats can be very fine. But is the congregational model now a rowboat in the woods in many locations and situations? That's my question. And even when not, can they stay afloat? This is a non-UU statistic, but in studies, it takes 8 Gen Xers and millennials to fill the place of one baby boomer in terms of funding. Now, I want you to think about that, you congregational leaders, and ask yourself what your plan is to grow your congregation 8 times. Okay, it takes, in terms of money, it takes 8 Gen Xers or millennials to fill the gap left by a dead old baby boomer like me and what I would contribute. All right. Now, this is a national statistic. So, how are you going to get your congregation to be 8 times larger than it is now? Or are you going to have to do something else in the next 20 years? That question is the existential one that congregations with old buildings especially need to look at. And it's the question newer groups need to ask when the question of building or buying a building comes up. Is that building and the assumptions about how congregations function an outmoded form? Are you buying yourself a rowboat that's going to sit in the woods? Each group has to figure that out for themselves. I'm not here to tell you your answer. I just want to bring up the question. I'm going to go into the detail a little bit about the situation of the place where I'm senior minister, First Unitarian in Minneapolis, just to maybe perhaps get your thoughts going. Now, first of all, First Unitarian Society is an institution. This is an architectural drawing from 1948. Doesn't actually look like that. We don't have reflecting pools around. But it is an institution. And we have an $8 million building with $3 million in deferred maintenance. All right? Think about that for a moment. It's a $6 million building with a $2 million lot, basically, actually, and $3 million in deferred maintenance. That's our situation. Now, if you haven't been to Minneapolis, First Unitarian Society, we have about 450 members, and we get about a dozen visitors every week walking through our doors. The building sits on a hill overlooking the Walker Arts Center. We got a nice downtown view you see there. The Walker is an internationally known contemporary art museum, and we are also near the sculpture garden there. There in the picture is Klaus Oldenburg's Spoon, Bridge, and Cherry. That thing gets several million visitors per year in the Twin Cities. It's the #1 tourist attraction in the Twin Cities, and it's about half a block from our building. Our building is in a high-rent district where condos sell in the neighborhood of about $1 million apiece, and not a month goes by the way, that we don't get at least one serious offer from a developer who licks their chops when they think about how many condos they can build on our $2 million lot if they tore our building down. Now, that's the challenge of the building. Then there's the challenge of the competition. Now, again, I realize that not all congregations have the same competition that we do. You may live in the South, totally different situation, West, East. We're in the Midwest, and you have to decide yourself, but I'll just look a little bit about what I am competing against in my congregation. Now, one thing we have is Jay Baker. He is the son of Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker, and with tattoos up both arms, and he hosts services at a nearby bowling alley bar. He performs weddings for same-sex couples underneath that Spoon and Cherry that you just saw, and he identifies as an evangelical Christian. All right? Now, this is his tour poster. You'll notice that his fellow traveler is, as he notes, a comedian and lesbian. Evangelicals can still say that, I guess. Evangelical Christianity, the point is not what it used to be. Loosen that Bible belt is what Jay is saying on his tour. Liberal Christianity, often touted as the rejuvenation of the future of Unitarian Universalism, is not in short supply in the Twin Cities. This church, for example, is affiliated with the American Baptists and the ELCA Lutherans, both liberal denominations. And if you look at it closely enough, you'll see that they also claim to have traditions in the Roman Catholics and the Episcopalians and what they call the free churches. Their slogan on the right-hand side of the slide is, "You should come. It's not that bad." They have a rock band and a recording studio there. Now, also notice the claim. I know it's a little hard to see, but this is what it says. You may occasionally be led to suspend your intellect, but you will not be required to sacrifice it. Now, how close is that to some of our UU churches? That's my competition. In terms of the institution I direct, Christianity Light, I shouldn't call it that, but I do, or Theism Light, it's a saturated market. Lots of people are doing that kind of thing, and it's a market saturated by groups that do it vastly better than we do, because they've been doing bells and smells for a couple thousand years, and we haven't. They speak the language, they know the songs that we trip over. They do it better than we do. Now, I want to take a little look at the United Methodist Church right across the street from me. They have an endowment of $13 million. My congregation has an endowment of $1.2 million, which ain't bad, but it's also not $13 million. They have 4 services on Sunday morning, ranging from traditional to, well, their 8:30 service occurs in an art gallery with a jazz band. They invite people to, and you'll see there, ask questions, sing their joy, to dance and laugh and create a prayer that grounds all in the goodness of creation. So interpretive dance is not just for UUs anymore, as you see. Now, by the way, those of a theological bent among you will notice that goodness of creation is not part of the Methodist creed, right? Not at all. The new normal for our liberal religious competition is that they do not adhere to the creeds that have defined them in the past. They've heard about this thing called a spiritual but not religious person, just as we have, and they are changing their programming accordingly. Again, I'm not saying it's a consumerist business, but it is. In other words, many liberal Christian churches have become creedless in exactly the way that UU congregations did a couple hundred years ago. I have breakfast with the minister of this congregation once a month. Recently he said, "Oh, sure, that early service is Unitarian. They do know what they are doing." They do know what they're doing. Their 11:15 service is based on the Iona community of Scotland. If you're not familiar, that's a Celtic Christian tradition that focuses on immediate experience of the sacred and on social justice issues. For those of you not familiar with Kurt Willems, he's a contemporary Christian theologian. What he has to say sounds a lot like Unitarian Universalism. Being a community of inclusion means that matters of theological opinion, non-essentials, are trumped by the great commandment, love. You will notice that the sentence is grammatically ambiguous. Are all matters of theological opinion not essential? Or are some essential and others aren't? Kurt Willems is not going to say, because he's not going to run you off. That's the competition for my congregation from the liberal Christians, and some of you are facing the same thing. All of these institutions and ministers have read those Pew Research reports. They have seen the handwriting on the wall, and they know that traditional Christianity has been found wanting. And they're willing and able to adapt to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And then there's us. Now, take a look at this mission statement. I found it almost randomly. I hope it's not yours. I found it on the web. Guided by UUA principles and purposes, our mission is to live in harmony with each other and nature, and to act with peace, compassion, and justice for all. Now, you tell me, which of the Christian congregations I've already shown you would disagree with that mission statement? That's baby food, right? And liberal Christians will chew these folks up and spit them out in the competition for that 8 Gen Xers they're going to have to make up for us old boomers when we're gone. It's time that UU congregations wake up and consider what existentialist philosopher Albert Camus pointed out as the first question of philosophy: why not commit suicide? Camus suggested that each of us ask ourselves that question in the mirror every morning. And UU congregations, I think, need to ask themselves a very similar question: why not close our doors? What are we doing that everybody else isn't doing? Are we peddling a liberalized, open-minded form of theism that's open to the currents of American culture with, some yoga and some mindfulness and all of that sort of wonderful stuff thrown in? Well, so are lots of other churches. And as the number of available bodies drop, right, as everybody fights for that 8 people they've got to find to make up for the one old one, the mainline denominations are going to keep shifting their message and ignoring their creeds and their traditions to get warm bodies into the pews. Some will remain rowboats despite the hard rowing in the woods, and some of them are going to figure out another method of propulsion. So we, the leaders of UU congregations, do well to ask ourselves, why not shut the doors and go home? We need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask, why are we asking that single parent to pony up to pay for a building and a staff that she has no reason to use? What is she getting in return? Now, one solution to this problem I propose is for UU congregations to stop attempting to outdo Christian congregations on the field of liberal theism. I propose that we look at one of our usable pasts and find something that Christian churches can't do. Unitarian Universalism has something in its skill set that Christians can't do, and that is humanism. I happen to be a missional preacher, as the saying goes nowadays. My mission, as I see it, is spreading the good news of humanism in our secularizing world. And to that 1/4 of the population that has left organized religion behind, I think, for very good reason. I, for one, didn't go back after I left, and I think more and more people are going to do that. When I discovered atheism and agnosticism almost 40 years ago, I joined 1% of the population, right? 1% of the population. Now atheists and agnostics make up 8% of the U.S. population. That's small, but it has exponentially grown in a generation, 8%. And we were just talking about how many Catholics are actually atheists but can't say it. So there's probably at least 10 or 15% out there who are, but they haven't come to admit it yet. There is at last a critical mass of people prepared to see reality as human nature shows it to be, rather than as human fantasy would like it to be. And that's why it is a humanist moment. When we consider who our potential new members are at First Unitarian Society, we think not of those looking for some vague sense of past Christian traditions, not those who are looking for some vague theism or any kind of religion in its traditional forms. We are looking for people who have no religious background whatsoever, a growing number of people in the United States. So what's humanism? It needs to be defined, and this is my definition. Humanism is an evidence-based value system dedicated to freedom of thought and to promoting the well-being of the planet and all living things. That's what I think humanism is. Simon Sinek is an author in the overcrowded field of management theory, and you may have seen one of his talks on TED Talks. He's really quite good at what he does. Sinek insists, and it makes sense to me, that successful businesses start with why. In his phrase, it's not what you do, it's why you do it. And I think that's a good question to ask, and the answer for your congregation is your mission statement. The why of First Unitarian Society is it's a beacon of free thought for the Twin Cities and the world. We probably ought to say humanist Unitarian Universalism, perhaps. That is our why. The how is offering intellectual and emotional experiences that inspire congregants toward greater meaning and purpose in their lives in the world. And the what is humanist assemblies, liberal religious education for children and adults, community, and social justice opportunities. I am deeply convinced that were Jesus alive today, he would say, "Those who seek to save their buildings shall lose them. But those who have a mission shall have everlasting coffee hours." What can humanism do that conventional Unitarian Universalism can't do? What can it do that others can't do? Carey Nieuwhof is a minister and an author. He's a liberal Christian writer. He does a blog called churchleaders.com, and he puts it this way. There is a crisis of meaning, not information. There is a crisis of connection, not followers. There is a crisis of direction, not options. Look at that closely. That is our informational world where we all carry around smartphones. We've got plenty of all those things, but we need focus, which again comes back to our usable past of humanism and our core values, freeing the mind and saving the world. People say, what's the theology of humanism? This is my answer. In 1837, the year after arriving back from the fateful journey on the HMS Beagle, Charles Darwin wrote in his notebook, "If we chose to let conjecture run wild, then animals, our fellow brethren in pain, diseases, death, suffering, and famine, our slaves in the most laborious works, our companions in our amusements, they may partake our origin in one common ancestor. We may be all netted together." Think for a moment about that in 1837. That's the interconnected web. We humanists choose to let conjecture run wild. Science has shown, and we know, that we are all netted together in the interdependent web of all existence. And humanists feel obligated to act on that knowledge. We have the usable past, and we have a bright new logo for First Unitarian Society. After that, the rest are just details. I try to think about what's the difference between a UU humanist congregation and a what could we call a normal UU congregation. I think the answer is one of focus. Conventional Unitarian Universalism posits that there is truth in many, if not all, religious traditions. Reasonable enough. Humanists see religions as meaningful products of human artifice, but think that these older interpretive systems do not function as well in the realm of truth or utility as contemporary scholarship, medicine, and science. A humanist assembly has no religious content. It is a religion-neutral zone. That's what we strive to do with our humanist assemblies. We don't assault anybody. We just don't talk about it because there's not a whole lot of reason to talk about it. After that, it's all just details. One of the things that we are doing, and I won't talk too much about this because Kevin will, is we try to find some other platforms because we find that a lot of secular people, especially more radical atheists, will not walk into a building that looks like a church, even though ours doesn't particularly look like a church. It still says Unitarian on it. So we look for other platforms, including coffee shops, bars, and we just opened a little place with a back room with a big screen TV called the Wedge Table. And so we try to reach out into those places and meet at times when people can show up because they're not going to get up on Sunday morning. In other words, if you find yourself with a rowboat in the woods, one way to do it is to change your location to find the people, go to them, or you can find some people to help you carry your rowboat around in the woods without being forced to ask those single parents to do that for you. We offer some of our space free of charge to help other nonprofits that have missions aligned with ours. We try to be an incubator for nonprofits, in other words. One, we house the Minnesota State Advocacy Network, the Minnesota UU Social Justice Alliance. We also house the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. These are housed free in the building. In addition, we partner with other groups that have missions that align with our own. We do have a paying guest, which is Gaia Democratic School, a very liberal private school. And we host activities for our local humanist Jewish group. They also pay, thank goodness. Also, we host the Sunday assemblies, that atheist church that has gotten quite a bit of press. We consider this our second service. We don't have to pay for it. We don't have to plan it. We just give them a room and they do it. By the way, there are about 40 people, right, 40 adults or so that keep showing up for that. They are just like small UU fellowships. They don't have good RE programs. So get them in your building. The demographic they get in are young families. And they say, wait a minute, I think I'll go to the RE program of that Unitarian church instead. We picked up 3 families that way this year.
And David, if I can just interject here, and these aren't the same people that come to our services.
Right,
This
no.
is outreach.
Yeah, these are people who would never walk in our doors.
1 to 2 of these 40 people every month are our people.
Yep. That's the trick. So don't be afraid of letting these people in your door, by the way, because they are us. We also house a kirtan group. That's a Hindu chanting, because we want to go all the way to that other experiential edge of what religion can mean. We also house the secular Buddhists. That's a group that does Buddhist meditation but doesn't believe that stuff. And so they definitely, secular Buddhists, they're secular Christians now, right? And so they fit along with our mission very well. We also house some activities of Minnesota atheists. Again, they often get scared of us because there does say Unitarian on the outside, but they come to us for some things. And also the Humanists of Minnesota, same thing. Sometimes they get itchy walking into something that looks sort of like a church. A group that I'm trying to get is the Secret Stoics of Minneapolis, right? I've written an RE curriculum for the fall in which we're going to be looking at Stoicism. And definitely their ideas align with ours a lot, and we'll see if we can get them into the building. Might be fun. And also from these slides, and I'm sure you know, most of these groups exist because of meetup groups. And so, they meet up, we become their address, and then they're finding our building. That's the whole point of the thing. We also are working with the Black Freethinkers of Minnesota on some joint social justice projects. Allow me to say it is a racist assumption to say that people of color are all religious. That's just racist, folks. There are lots of people who agree with us entirely, and you don't have to, bend your way of thinking at all. Just read Anthony Penn, right? It just makes sense. So stay where you are and, work with those sorts of people. Also, it's a no-brainer for us, of course, to offer a secular alternative to 12-step programs. This is a secular organization for sobriety. We house them. They're able to pay a little bit. And we're going to become the house for the Minnesota chapter of the United Coalition of Reason. Also, we house Couples in Transition. It's a support group for couples facing gender transition. All of these groups are too small to have their own buildings. They can, in various degrees, pay rent to help us with our rowboat in the woods, and it makes us a hub of liberal religious activity in the downtown area. As the birthplace of congregational humanism in the Unitarian tradition, First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis has a mission to continue that wherever it happens to lead. And I think that all humanists share that mission, the mission of freeing the mind, saving the world, creating a community where no snake oil is sold. Right? That's our job. Create a community where no snake oil is sold. The numbers are the numbers. Unitarian Universalists can scramble along after other liberal mainline denominations for the last remaining people who are willing to hear God language, or we can meet the needs of a small but growing group of people, those who are done with religion, but interested in free thinking, in community, in finding meaning and purpose, and in being connected in order to make an impact on social action issues. Now, sure, back to that, it may mean that we have to unscrew the locks from the doors and unscrew the doors themselves from their jambs, but you know what? If that's our mission, that's our mission. That's what humanism is all about, doing what it takes to free the mind and to save the world. Thank you.